Have you ever heard the joke about the man who walked into a bar? He said, "Ouch," because it was a metal bar. Simple jokes like these are not only amusing, but also great tools for learning English. Humor has a way of breaking down the complexities of a language, making it less intimidating and more engaging. Learning English through funny stories isn't just about having a good laugh. It's about making the language stick in a way that's enjoyable and relatable. When we laugh, we're more likely to remember what we've learned. Humor helps us connect emotionally to the material, making the language feel less like a task and more like a part of our everyday life. In this video, we'll explore how a simple, humorous scenario can teach you new vocabulary, grammar, and cultural nuances. The goal is to make learning English a fun and memorable experience. By the end of this video, you'll not only have learned something new, but also had a few laughs along the way, proving that language learning doesn't have to be serious to be effective. Importance of humor in language learning. Humor is one of the most powerful tools for keeping learners engaged in any subject, and language learning is no exception. Imagine sitting through a monotonous grammar lecture versus listening to a funny story where the characters use the same grammatical structures you need to learn. Which one would you remember better? The humor in stories creates a relaxed and enjoyable atmosphere, making the learning process feel less like work and more like play. This engagement is crucial because when learners are entertained, they're more likely to stay focused and motivated. Laughter triggers the release of dopamine, a chemical in the brain that enhances mood and attention. By incorporating humor, learners remain more enthusiastic about returning to their studies, which ultimately leads to better outcomes. Retention is another area where humor plays a significant role. Studies have shown that information presented in a humorous context is more likely to be remembered than information delivered in a dry, straightforward manner. This is because humor creates a vivid, emotional experience. When we laugh, the event becomes more memorable, and the associated vocabulary or grammar points stick with us longer. For instance, learning a new idiom through a funny story where a character hilariously misinterprets its meaning makes it easier to recall the phrase later. Moreover, the enjoyment of the story makes learners more willing to review and revisit the material, reinforcing their learning through repetition without it feeling repetitive. Example: take the idiom, break the ice. In a humorous context, a character might literally try to break a block of ice during a party to start conversations. This visual and comical scenario embeds the idiom in the learner's memory far more effectively than a dry definition ever could. Humor also provides invaluable cultural insights, which are essential for truly mastering a language. Every language has its own unique style of humor, often deeply rooted in cultural references, social norms, and historical contexts. Understanding these nuances helps learners appreciate not just the language but the people who speak it. Funny stories often include puns, wordplay, and cultural references that reveal how native speakers think and interact. For example, in English-speaking countries, self-deprecating humor is quite popular. A funny story where a character makes light of their own mistakes not only teaches vocabulary and grammar, but also shows learners how humor can be used to navigate social situations. This understanding is crucial for developing a sense of belonging and comfort in conversations with native speakers. Moreover, humor can highlight differences in cultural attitudes toward common situations, such as work, family, or relationships. By learning through humor, students are exposed to these cultural subtleties, which enhances their ability to use the language appropriately in various contexts. Humor in language learning isn't just about having a good time. It's about engaging learners, enhancing retention, and providing deep cultural insights. By incorporating funny stories into their studies, learners can make the process of mastering English more effective, enjoyable, and culturally enriching. Setting the stage. Meet our protagonist, Tom, a well-meaning but clumsy young man who seems to have a knack for finding himself in the most awkward situations. Tom is in his late 20s, with a mop of unruly hair and a perpetual look of surprise on his face, as if he's always just realized he forgot something important. He's the kind of person who, despite his best intentions, often ends up turning simple tasks into comic adventures. Tom's defining trait is his optimism. No matter how absurd the situation gets, he remains convinced he can handle it. Then there's Sarah, Tom's witty and sarcastic best friend. Sarah is the voice of reason in Tom's life, but she has a mischievous streak that often leads her to egg him on for her own amusement. She's sharp-tongued but good-natured, always ready with a clever quip or a playful jab at Tom's expense. Her humor is dry, and she often uses it to diffuse tense situations or point out the absurdity of Tom's predicaments. Lastly, we have Mr. Jenkins, the eccentric elderly neighbor who's known for his strange inventions and peculiar habits. Mr. Jenkins is always up to something, whether it's building a robot to fetch his mail or trying to train his pet parrot to recite Shakespeare. His antics add another layer of humor to the story, as his inventions usually work in unexpected ways. often contributing to the chaos that follows. The story unfolds in a quaint suburban neighborhood where the houses are neatly lined with picket fences, and everyone knows each other's business. It's a sunny Saturday morning, the kind of day that promises simplicity and relaxation. The setting is the perfect backdrop for a comedic tale, where the ordinary is about to become anything but. Tom has decided to help Mr. Jenkins with a new project, installing a smart home system in his house. Sarah, ever the supportive friend, has agreed to come along, more for the entertainment value than anything else. The scene is set in Mr. Jenkins's cluttered garage, which looks like a cross between a mad scientist's lab and a second-hand electronics store. Wires dangle from the ceiling, gadgets of every shape and size are strewn across workbenches, and in the middle of it all stands Mr. Jenkins, wearing safety goggles and holding what looks like a futuristic remote control. The situation is ripe for humor from the get-go. Tom, ever eager but inept with technology, is tasked with connecting the system to the main power source. Sarah watches with amusement as Tom, armed with a manual that seems to be written in another language, bumbles with wires and buttons. Mr. Jenkins, confident in his invention's brilliance, offers instructions that are both vague and overly technical, adding to the confusion. As the story progresses, Tom's attempts to install the system lead to a series of comedic mishaps. Each character's unique traits come into play, creating a humorous dynamic that keeps the audience engaged. Tom's clumsiness, Sarah's sarcastic commentary, and Mr. Jenkins' unpredictable inventions combine to set the stage for a laugh-out-loud adventure in the heart of suburbia. The funny story. It all begins with Tom, Sarah, and Mr. Jenkins gathered in the garage, ready to install the smart home system. Tom, holding the instruction manual upside down, squints at the tiny print, muttering, "Why do they make these things so complicated? It's like they don't want anyone to use it." Sarah smirks. "Maybe it's to keep people like you from blowing up the neighborhood." Mr. Jenkins, tinkering with a panel of wires, responds confidently, "Don't worry, Tom. With my expertise and your, enthusiasm, what could possibly go wrong?" Tom starts by connecting the system's main unit to the house's power supply. As he fumbles with the wires, he accidentally switches the kitchen appliances on and off, causing the toaster to pop out a slice of bread repeatedly, as if in protest. "Looks like the toaster's already enjoying the new system," Sarah quips. Determined to make it work, Tom continues. He plugs in the smart hub, but instead of a smooth setup, the garage lights begin to flicker, and the security alarm starts blaring intermittently. Flustered, Tom tries to fix the situation by pressing random buttons on the remote, "This must be the disco mode," Sarah says, laughing as the lights flash and the alarm adds a chaotic rhythm. Mr. Jenkins, excited by the unexpected turn, adds, "This is exactly the kind of unintended functionality that leads to breakthroughs. Let's observe what happens next." Tom, sweating, looks at Sarah. "I'm in over my head. I feel like I'm trying to herd cats here." Sarah chuckles. "Well, if it makes you feel any better, you're doing a fantastic job of turning this house into a circus. Maybe we should sell tickets." Determined not to give up, Tom tries to reset the system by unplugging the main unit. Just as he does, Mr. Jenkins' parrot, perched on a nearby shelf, squawks loudly, "Fire! Fire!" Tom jumps, startled. Is that bird psychic or something? We're not even close to a fire yet. Sarah, stifling her laughter, replies, "Maybe it's just predicting the future. Let's hope it's wrong." In his attempt to calm things down, Tom manages to connect the system to the voice-activated assistant. He speaks into the device, "Turn off all the lights." Instead, the garage door starts opening and closing rapidly, creating a wind tunnel effect that sends papers flying everywhere. The climax of the story comes when Mr. Jenkins, ever the optimist, decides to demonstrate the system's facial recognition feature. He stands in front of the camera and says, "Recognize owner." The system responds in a robotic voice, "Intruder detected, initiating lockdown." Suddenly, the garage door slams shut, trapping them inside. The lights turn off completely, leaving them in darkness except for the glowing red light of the security camera. Tom, panicked, exclaims, "Great, now we're stuck in here like sardines in a can." Sarah, unable to contain her laughter, remarks, "Well, at least we know the security system works. Maybe too well." Mr. Jenkins, ever the tinkerer, calmly states, "This is just a minor hiccup. All inventions have their teething problems. We'll be out in no time." The situation escalates when the parrot starts mimicking the alarm, adding a screeching woo-woo-woo to the already chaotic scene. Tom, finally succumbing to the absurdity, slumps against the wall and laughs. "I think the house is alive and it's messing with us." Eventually, they manage to reset the system by using the emergency override. As the garage door opens and the lights come back on, Tom, still chuckling, says, "Well, that was an adventure. Who knew setting up a smart home could be so, eventful?" Sarah, shaking her head but smiling, adds, "Only you, Tom? Only you." Mr. Jenkins, beaming with pride, declares, "I'd say we've made excellent progress today. Next time we'll try connecting it to the sprinklers." As they leave the garage, Tom turns to Sarah and says, "Remind me never to volunteer for anything involving wires again." Sarah grins. "Don't worry. I'll remind you every time you look at a light switch." Their day ends with shared laughter, the perfect conclusion to a hilariously chaotic attempt at modern technology, and a reminder of how humor can turn even the most frustrating experiences into cherished memories. Language learning elements. Vocabulary. In our story, several new words and phrases are introduced that can enrich your English vocabulary. Clumsy, meaning awkward in movement or handling things. Example: Tom is known for being clumsy, often turning simple tasks into comic adventures. Quip, a witty remark. Example: Sarah often makes a quip to lighten the mood. Fumble, to do something awkwardly, especially when handling something. Example: Tom fumbled with the wires as he tried to connect the system. Hiccup, a small problem or delay. Example: Mr. Jenkins referred to the system malfunction as a minor hiccup. Teething problems, minor problems that occur at the beginning of a process or project. Example: Mr. Jenkins believes that all new inventions have their teething problems. By integrating these words into your vocabulary, you can describe situations more vividly and accurately in your conversations. Grammar focus. The story also provides excellent examples of grammatical structures that can be useful for learners. Idiomatic expressions. In over my head. This means being involved in something that is too difficult to handle. Example: Tom realized he was in over his head with the smart home installation. Herd cats, an idiom meaning trying to control or organize a chaotic situation. Example: Tom felt like he was trying to herd cats as he struggled with the setup. Present continuous tense, used to describe actions happening at the moment of speaking. Example: Tom is connecting the system while Sarah is watching. Past simple versus past continuous, demonstrating the difference in usage between the two tenses. Example of past simple: Tom plugged in the smart hub. Example of past continuous: while Tom was plugging in the smart hub, the lights began to flicker. Reported speech, reflecting on what someone has said, often used in storytelling. Example: Mr. Jenkins said that the malfunction was an unintended functionality. By studying these structures, learners can better understand how to form sentences that accurately reflect different time frames and nuances in communication. Pronunciation tips. Several words in the story may be challenging to pronounce for English learners. Here are some tips to help with pronunciation. Clumsy. Clumsy. Pronunciation tip. Emphasize the first syllable clum and make sure the sound is soft. Quip. Pronunciation tip. Focus on the clubu sound at the beginning, which is a quick, light sound. Fumble. Fumble. Pronunciation tip. The F sound is followed by a short U sound, and the blay is soft and gentle. Hiccup. Ick. Pronunciation tip. The emphasis is on the first syllable hic, and the cup should be pronounced quickly. Teething. Pronunciation tip. Pay attention to the tek sound, which is voiced and similar to the sound in this. Practicing these words with correct pronunciation will help learners sound more natural and confident when speaking English. Encourage repetition and listening to native speakers to improve accuracy and fluency. Post-story discussion. Comprehension questions. To ensure that learners have understood the story and to spark discussion, here are some questions that delve into key aspects of the narrative. What was the main challenge that Tom faced while setting up the smart home system? This question encourages learners to recall the primary conflict in the story, focusing on Tom's struggle with the technical setup. How did Sarah and Mr. Jenkins react to the situation? This prompts learners to explore the characters' reactions and interactions, emphasizing the humor and camaraderie in the story. What was the funniest moment in the story, and why? This open-ended question allows learners to express their personal opinions and reflections on the humor presented in the story. What idioms or expressions did Tom use during the story, and what do they mean? This question reinforces the vocabulary and idiomatic expressions introduced, encouraging learners to connect meanings with context. How did the parrot add to the comedic elements of the story? Discussing the parrot's role helps highlight how unexpected elements can enhance the humor in a narrative. Encourage learners to answer these questions in pairs or small groups to foster collaborative learning and discussion. Role play. Role-playing is an effective way to practice speaking and enhance understanding of the story's events and language use. Here's a suggested activity. Scenario. Divide the class into groups of 3, assigning each person a role. Tom, Sarah, or Mr. Jenkins. Each group will act out the story's key scenes, focusing on the humorous dialogue and actions. Instructions. Preparation. Each group takes a few minutes to review their characters' lines and actions. They should pay attention to the expressions and idioms used in the story. Acting. The groups perform the scenes, using props or miming actions as needed. Encourage them to exaggerate the humorous elements to make the role-play engaging and fun. Feedback. After each performance, the audience can provide feedback, focusing on the use of language and how well the humor was conveyed. This activity not only helps with language practice, but also builds confidence in speaking and performing in front of others. Writing exercise. To consolidate the vocabulary and grammar learned, encourage learners to write their own funny story. Here's a step-by-step guide for the exercise. Topic selection. Ask learners to think of a funny or awkward situation they have experienced or heard about. Outline. Have them create a brief outline, including characters, setting, and the sequence of events leading to the humorous climax. Incorporate vocabulary. Encourage learners to use at least 5 new words or phrases from the story. They should also try to include idiomatic expressions and grammatical structures, such as the present continuous tense or reported speech. Drafting. Learners write their story, focusing on making the narrative clear and amusing. Emphasize the importance of a well-developed punchline or climax. Sharing. Once completed, learners can pair up to read their stories aloud or submit them for peer review. This allows them to receive constructive feedback on their language use and storytelling skills. By engaging in these activities, learners reinforce their comprehension and practical use of English in a creative and enjoyable way. Conclusion. As we wrap up, let's recap the key learning points from our funny story. Vocabulary enrichment. We explored new words like clumsy, quip, and hiccup, which were integrated into the story in humorous contexts. Understanding these words in real-life scenarios helps cement their meanings and usage. Grammar insights. The story demonstrated essential grammatical structures, including idiomatic expressions, the present continuous tense, and reported speech, which are vital for everyday communication. Cultural context. Humor served as a bridge to understanding cultural nuances, making language learning more relatable and engaging. By incorporating these elements, the story not only entertained, but also provided a practical and memorable language learning experience. Learning English doesn't have to be a tedious process. Humor makes the journey enjoyable, keeps motivation high, and improves retention. As you continue your language learning journey, embrace the lighter side of learning. Laugh at the mistakes, enjoy the funny moments, and use them as stepping stones to fluency. Now it's your turn. Think about a funny experience or story from your life and try to write or share it in English. Whether it's a minor mishap or a hilarious misunderstanding, sharing your story will help you practice English in a fun and authentic way. Join a community of learners, participate in discussions, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Remember, humor is not just a tool for learning, but a way to connect with others and build confidence. Additional resources. Recommended books: Eats, Shoots and Leaves by Lynn Truss, a humorous take on punctuation and grammar. Anguished English by Richard Lederer, a collection of English language bloopers and humorous mistakes. The Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson, an entertaining exploration of the quirks of the English language. These books offer a mix of humor and education, perfect for enhancing your language skills while enjoying a good laugh. Online platforms: Reddit's Arsh Jokes, a great place to read and share jokes in English, helping you pick up new phrases and expressions. BuzzFeed Comedy. Articles and lists filled with humorous content that can aid in learning contemporary English usage. BBC Learning English, English at the Movies. A series that uses movie clips to teach English in an entertaining way. Engaging with these platforms will expose you to different forms of humor and practical language use. Apps and tools. Duolingo offers gamified lessons with a touch of humor to make learning enjoyable. Memrise uses funny mnemonics to help remember vocabulary and phrases. Comedy Central app. Watch stand-up shows and comedy skits to immerse yourself in English humor. These tools and resources can add a fun dimension to your language practice, making learning a daily joy. By leveraging these resources, you can continue to develop your English skills in a way that is both effective and entertaining. Keep laughing and learning.